Good afternoon. I call to order the meeting of the Metropolitan Council Transportation Committee for September 9th, 2024. Our first order of business is approval of the agenda. If there are no changes or additions, we can proceed.
So moved.
We don't have to move the agenda.
That's right.
Yep. So we do have to approve two sets of meeting minutes because we could not take actions at the last meeting. So the first is to approve the August 12th, 2024 meeting minutes.
Motion to approve.
Moved by Councilmember Chambliss. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Carter. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. And the motion carries. Now we'll move on to approval of the August 26, 2024 minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Vento. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Chambliss. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. And the motion carries. Now we're on to reports, and we're going to turn first to MTS Services Executive Director Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, council members. I am pleased to announce good news from the federal government. Last Thursday, over $1 billion of grants were announced nationwide through the Safe Streets for All program. This program provides grants directly to communities for implementation planning and demonstration projects aimed at preventing deaths and serious injuries on the nation's roadways. So, big topic for us, certainly something we heard a lot about through not just our monthly TAB meetings, but also through our transportation policy plan. So good news is that in Minnesota, with this round of funding, 16 projects totaling nearly $30 million were selected for funding, including a grant of nearly $16 million for the city of St. Paul to implement improvements on the city's high injury network, which is a designation for disproportionate burden of severe crashes. So planning grants were also issued to 9 cities, ranging from $44,000 to $412,000. These cities include Apple Valley, Bloomington, Brooklyn Park, Cottage Grove, Hastings, Hopkins, New Brighton, Shakopee, and West St. Paul. So those funds would be used to develop safety action plans and for demonstration projects in those communities. So very good news for the region, especially for St. Paul, and a third round of grants is anticipated in November of 2024, and then the program would solicit for proposals again in early 2025. So good news for the region. And with that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Very good news. Councilmember Vento.
The third round thank you, Madam Chair. The third round in November of 2024, that will include grant applications from us as well?
From around the region.
Around the region,
Yep.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's what I meant. Yeah. Okay, good.
Councilmember Chambliss.
So, can you provide information on the total and how that's divided amongst the target cities?
Sure. So roughly, $1 billion nationwide, 16 million, 30 million in Minnesota, and then 16 million is the big amount of that for St. Paul. The other amounts really range from 44,000 to about 400,000. I think what we'll do is email out the line by line and put that in the perhaps in the minutes as well. But yeah, it's good news.
Very good news. All right, any additional questions? All right, thank you, Charles. Now we're going to turn to Metro Transit General Manager Canderas.
All right, thank you, Chair Barber, council members. Just a couple updates today. First, on the state fair, we presented to you our plans this summer and just wanted to come back and recap how it went. This year, Metro Transit provided just shy of 331,000 rides, which represents close to a 14% increase in ridership compared to last year. That includes both our express services and our regular route services to the fair. We think that is partly attributed to the fact we were able to operate a couple more sites this year, and we're just really pleased to be able to serve our communities in this way. So I also wanted to just thank all the Metro Transit staff who really went above and beyond to provide that service. It's a lot of work, but I know a lot of dedication, a lot of passion here to make sure it goes well for people who want to partake in the fair. So that was one update. And then the other update is just to draw attention to an invitation you received to our September 18th Ovations Operator Awards Brunch. This is an event we used to hold regularly, but it's been on hiatus the last couple of years. But we're excited to bring it back this year. It's an opportunity to honor our outstanding outstanding bus and rail operators, and you're invited to attend. So you should have more information from your community relations specialist, but certainly if you have questions, please reach out to me. Again, that's next Wednesday, September 18th, 9 to noon. So with that, I would take any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there questions or comments? All right, I will tell you, in years past, the ovation ceremony is a lot of fun if you get a chance to get over there. And I know that our employees and operators really, really appreciate it. So, yeah, all right, thank you. And we don't have a TAAC report tonight, so then we'll move to the consent agenda. There are 4 items on consent. I'd entertain a motion to approve the items on consent.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Carter. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Pacheco. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, and the motion carries. Now we're on to our first item of non-consent, which is business item 2024-219, which is the 2025 to 2028 Transportation Improvement Program. We have Joe Barbeau here to present. Okay, there it is.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm here to talk about the Transportation Improvement Program, which I do annually. I think a lot of you have seen a lot of this before, but I'll go through it pretty briefly. Stop me if I gloss over something that you might have missed last time or might not have heard. So the TIP is a 4-year list of transportation projects funded in whole or in part with federal funding. Any project that receives any federal funding needs to be in the Transportation Improvement Program, as well as any regionally significant project. It's rare that we would put a project that does not receive any federal funding in the TIP, because regionally significant projects tend to be bigger. That said, we have one this year for the first time in my memory, in Scott County interchange project that is entirely locally funded. All MPOs in the country are required to do this, and then once we approve the TIP here, we provide it to MnDOT, who puts it into the Statewide Transportation Improvement Program, or STIP. And in order for a project to be completed, it really has to be in the STIP. So the feds check the STIP out, and the STIP is reflective in our 7 counties, reflective of of our TIP, as well as small portions of Wright and Sherburne County, which are per the census in our planning area. So the types of projects in the TIP are transit projects that are programmed by Metro Transit and Met Council with Federal Transportation Administration formula funds, roadway projects that are usually programmed by MnDOT, as well as our regional solicitation projects, which we talked about last meeting or 2 meetings ago, recently. And those tend to be bike ped projects, roadway projects, and transit projects. And then, as I mentioned before, Sherburne and Wright County, small piece there we do look at. We are not into Wisconsin at this point per the last census. So here's the schedule for what should say the 2025 to 2028 TIP. Change all those dates except for the big one, the big font. So we're here on well, not August 26th, it's now September 9th for our recommendation from this body to the full council. And then it goes to the council on the September 25th meeting. MnDOT will then take it, include it in the STIP. And federal approval, it says November, December of 2024. In recent years, it's been about November 1st. So that's kind of a pessimistic timeline, I suppose. Here's a brief summary of some of what's in there. There's about 520 or so projects in there. About $1.8 billion worth of federal highway funding, about $1.2 billion in federal transit funding. Property tax and state taxes are higher than that at $2.6 billion, and then trunk highway funds, that's from the state of Minnesota, are $703 million or so, for a total of about $6.2 billion. And then the pie chart shows, to no surprise, that most of the projects are highway and transit projects. Some bike ped only projects in the green. The reason this is bike ped only is because we do have bike ped elements of some of the highway projects, and then other types of projects and set-asides might be something like for maintenance, things that we don't know exactly what they're going to look like or where they're going to be just yet, things like that, and that's the purple. And so we had a 45-day public review period, and the goal there is to gather feedback and information about the impact of the solicitation. It is very difficult at times to really relate public comments into the TIP itself. For example, if somebody says, well, I think there should be a bike project right here in my neighborhood, well, there's no bike project scope there. You can't really just put it in the TIP, but those are the kind of feedback that we take going into other processes. We're currently in the TPP process, so we hear those kind of comments and sort of apply it on the bigger picture than the tip itself. So we have email and web posting and social media to promote the comment period. We hosted a virtual public meeting in June, and we had about 8 participants. We did get 3 official comments from that, and we have that every year and usually get 5 to 15 people there. So here's a little review of the public comments, and we included the public comment report in this. We had 94 commenters provide a total of 98 comments. 95 of those were written through our normal channels. That's how we get most of our comments, and 3 of them were done at the live virtual public meeting. So the themes that we had, and that's almost anything that had more than one comment. We had a lot of comments on rethinking I-94, 71, in fact, related to the bridge repair and replacement projects on Interstate 94. And I think we appreciate those comments, but I do want to point out that that came as a result of a blog post that asked people to do that. And so that's why those numbers are high. And so I think there was concern that the I-94 bridges, and there's about 7 bridges in the project area, could influence the decision on the future of Interstate 94. That said, once the Rethinking I-94 project is done, there's no funding for it. So those implementations could be a ways off. In the meantime, we have bridges that are in condition that need to be repaired. And that's MnDOT's basic response to that as well. Other things we saw, we had a few commenters that were opposed to changing I-94 in any way. That's not really a tip issue. That's something that probably came off of the heels of the other comments, though. Highway 280 and Broadway, there's a left turn that MnDOT is going to close from northbound 280 to Broadway, and some folks were opposed to that. I think they were concerned with potential for speed limits to be increased, and speed limits are not really a tip issue, but we're passing that on to MnDOT. And then there were 4 comments requesting removal of the Highway 252 projects in northern Hennepin County, and that was kind of the theme of the comments last year. And then we had a lot of non-project specific comments, usually folks that want want to see certain types of modes be implemented more frequently than they are, bike, ped, and things of that nature. So here's a proposed action. I don't intend to read this slide. I don't know if anybody needs to read this slide for this action. But this is the action to recommend approval. This is the action that the council will take to approve the tip, and I believe Transportation Committee is recommending that today. So with that, I know that was quick for 500 and some projects, but I would be here for any questions.
Any questions or comments? All right, then I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2024-219.
Motion to approve.
Moved by Councilmember Chambliss. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Vento. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, now we're on to our second business item 2024-236, which is signature authority for MVTA microtransit vehicles and accessories in Southwest Transit Mobility Hub. We have Nicole Clacker. Welcome.
Madam Chair and committee members, thank you. My name is Nicole Clapp. I'm the grants manager for the CDMTS Finance and Administration Unit. My pronouns are she, her. So the request before you today is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to execute grant agreements with replacement service municipalities or suburban transit providers as follows. To Minnesota Valley Transit Authority, or MVTA, a grant for microtransit vehicles and accessories, including technology, bike racks, decals, in the amount of $554,000. So MVTA has requested to use their available undesignated funds that are held in the council's authorized capital budget as regional transportation sales and use tax to complete this project. These funds are available to MVTA to use at their discretion for eligible public transportation projects. The other is to Southwest Transit for a grant to lease and operate vans for the Southwest Transit Prime service in an amount up to $4,591,000. Financial support for this grant comes from the Regional Solicitation CMAQ funding awarded in 2018. This federal funding is matched by a combination of council-provided regional transportation sales and use tax and Southwest Transit local funds. So the council provides financial assistance financial assistance to replacement service municipalities for transit improvements and manages federal funding for providers through subrecipient grant agreements. Grant agreements proposed through this business item would enable capital and operating projects that advance microtransit services advanced by transit providers in the region. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from council members? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2024-236.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Vento. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Councilmember Carter. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Now we're on to business item 2024-193, which is the Metro G Line authorization to release recommended corridor plan for public comment. We have Laura Gritterman here and Kyle O'Donnell.
Good afternoon, Chair Barber, council members. I'm Laura Gredeman. I'm a planner on the arterial BRT team, and I'm here today to talk about the Metro G Line. Today's proposed action is 2024-193 to authorize release of the Metro G Line recommended corridor plan for public review and comment, and to direct staff to collect public comments through Friday, October 25th, summarize the comments, and report the findings to the Metropolitan Council. The Metro G Line will be an important link in the growing metro network throughout the region, providing fast, frequent, all-day service from Little Canada in the north to West St. Paul in the south. The G Line will run primarily on Rice Street and Robert Street, replacing Route 62 and Route 68 as the main transit service in those corridors. This alignment was adopted by the Metropolitan Council in 2021. One unique thing about the G Line project is that there are a lot of coordinated projects that we're working with in the corridor. I know you've all seen the phased map before, but just briefly, the phase one, we're planning to construct and open the G Line in 2 phases, with phase 1 construction from 2026 to 2027, and phase 1 opening in 2027. And then phase 2 construction from 2027 to 2028. And that would be in coordination with MnDOT's Robert Street South project. I will note that the phase 1 opening in 2027 is within the time horizon of the Network Now work that's being done by Service Development. Also, the G Line recommended corridor plan that is in front of you all today identifies station locations for both phases of the project. For the G Line planned project schedule, there are 2 main planning milestones highlighted in the darker blue. The first was the identification of the alignment in March of 2021, the adoption of that alignment. And then now the other dark blue circle is the final corridor plan approval, which we are targeting sometime later this winter. We're currently at the recommended corridor plan step in the project. Upon authorization to release the plan would begin a 30-day public comment period this fall. And I will note that we, last year, were out in the community with the draft corridor plan release and did 6 weeks of public comment period last September. The corridor plan includes proposed station and platform locations for the G Line. A reminder that stations are the intersection where the bus stops, and then BRT platforms are where people are actually getting on and off the bus. The corridor plan includes information on how we came to those proposals, as well as other planning considerations, including project coordination with agency partners, bus priority treatments, and also the supporting local bus service. And again, I'll note that within the G Line plan, the supporting local bus service is aligned with the work of Network Now as well. Before jumping into a little bit more detail about the recommended corridor plan, I wanted to give a short overview of the draft corridor plan engagement. We have amazing outreach staff that we work closely with, Nasser Musa and Sia Bell, and they were very, very busy during that 6-week period. And I'll say that from a program perspective, every time we go out and do an engagement period, we're improving on our best practices and finding better ways to really connect with the community and meeting our riders and community members where they are to make it easier for them to give feedback on the project. One key way that we receive feedback on the project is through the survey. We received 320 survey responses to the G-Line Draft Corridor Plan survey, and we're really happy to see that there was strong support from the community for the G-Line, with 78% of respondents agreeing that with the statement that they like the G-Line project, and 71% of respondents replying that they will use the G-Line when it opens. This slide shows the demographics, some of the demographics from the Draft Corridor Plan survey. And I'll say right off the bat that we continue to work towards making sure that our survey demographics are in line with the people who are, the demographics of the Route 62 and Route 68 riders today. We still have more work to do on that, but are continuing to find ways to connect with different areas of the community. A majority of the survey respondents use Metro Transit at least a few times a week or every day. Most have a home zip code within the corridor. Most identify as white, and most respondents have lower than average household incomes. And also, notably, 36% of respondents identify as having a disability. Beyond the survey responses, we also heard some different engagement themes from all of our engagement work. The first is hearing feedback about all station and platform locations along the G-Line corridor. We received responses about every station along the line, which we feel good that we did a good job with outreach of kind of balancing along the corridor. Through door knocking, we identified several high interest station and platform locations, which I'll get into in a couple of slides. We also heard interest in looking to change or extend the planned G-Line alignment. This is looking at extensions is something that we've done before in the arterial BRT program and is something that we can certainly do again for the G-Line. However, we are not looking to change the alignment during this phase of the project today. And then finally, we heard interest in pedestrian and traffic safety along the corridor. And I'll just note that this is already a key input for us as we're determining station and platform locations. But we really appreciate hearing from the community and their lived experience, kind of additional feedback on that. So now jumping into the recommended corridor plan, this slide shows the 8 stations where we took a closer look at what we recommended in the draft corridor plan. The first 3 at the top, we did additional analysis but are not recommending a change to what we have proposed. And then there are 5 stations that we did a deeper dive and are recommending changes. The stations that are highlighted in bold, I'm going to walk through in the next couple of slides to give you a little bit more detail. The first intersection that we did some analysis on is Cesar Chavez and State. During the engagement period, we heard business owner feedback about the southbound platform location, and they specifically cited public safety and the loss of 3 to 4 parking spaces. On this aerial on the right hand of the slide, the southbound platform is the box with southbound in it, kind of right in the center of the image. For the analysis, we evaluated alternative southbound locations in partnership with the City of St. Paul. Alternative 1 is the purple box near the top of the image, and then alternative 2 is in the bottom right-hand corner. We are not recommending alternative 1 because that platform location is at a mid-block location. Generally for arterial BRT, we try to be as close to a signalized intersection as possible, and that is to really give people getting on and off the bus a safe place to cross the street with a signal and a crosswalk. Mid-block crossings really encourage people to get off the bus and just start across the street, which is a pedestrian safety concern. So for that reason, we're not recommending alternative 1. Alternative 2 in the bottom right-hand corner is the reason that we are not recommending that location is because State Street along here has a very steep slope to the point that it would make it difficult to be able to design a platform that would be accessible for all of our riders. So for that reason, we are not recommending a platform in that location. We are continuing to go forward with the southbound platform location that we recommended in the draft corridor plan. However, we are very sensitive to the impact that we might have on small businesses and are working with the city of St. Paul to try to identify locations along here to replace some of that parking that we would be using for the platform. We are looking at far side of the intersection where the local bus stop is today when the G-Line southbound platform opens, kind of utilizing that for parking. The second station location that we're going to walk through is Robert and Butler. And during engagement, we heard business owner feedback about the northbound platform location. They specifically cited platform maintenance and reducing traffic crashes as their main concerns. Again, we identified a couple of alternatives and did some analysis. Alternative 1 is the purple box in the top half of the image, and then alternative 2 is right along the bottom of the image. We are not recommending a platform location at alternative 1 today for the same reason as before, that it is quite a ways away from that signalized intersection. I would encourage people to get off the bus and potentially make an unsafe pedestrian crossing across Robert Street. Alternative 2, just south of the intersection, we're not recommending because adding a platform here would likely require the full closure of the driveway for that business. So for that reason, we're not pursuing that platform location. With the recommendation to keep the platform location in the same space, we are looking to work with our design team to help limit impacts to that business front when we're further into the design portion of the project. So we recommend retaining that far side platform location. And then finally, Robert and Sydney is a location where we changed the station location. In the G-Line draft corridor plan, we proposed a station at Robert and Curtis. And really the principal reason for this is because this is a signalized intersection and we wanted the pedestrian crossing benefits. In the recommended corridor plan, however, we are recommending a station at Robert and Sydney. And there are several reasons, there's several reasons for this. This station is within MnDOT's Robert Street South reconstruction project. And through that project, MnDOT is exploring making several changes to this stretch of roadway. The first is the removal of the traffic signal at Curtis Street. So that takes away a principal driver for us to want to be at that intersection. As part of the project, MnDOT is also exploring ways to improve the pedestrian crossing at Sydney Street. So if we're unable to be at a signalized intersection, we like to try to find ways to improve the crossing for people to be able to get across the street before and after reaching the bus. And then finally, MnDOT is, through their project, is exploring the possibility of closing the driveway in the southwest corner of the intersection, shown with a red X on this. And I will note that that driveway closure is independent of the G-line project. For the recommended corridor plan public engagement period, it will begin with council action to release the plan. It's a 30-day public engagement period planned for September 25th to October 25th. And again, with the Network Now work that I think you'll see again in a couple of presenters, their outreach period is probably going to overlap slightly with this, so we are making sure that our outreach staff is really collaborating with that group as well to make sure that we are being efficient and being careful with people's time. So in closing, the proposed action 2024-193 to authorize release of the Metro G-Line recommended corridor plan for public review and comment, and to direct staff to collect public comments through Friday, October 25th, summarize comments, and report the findings to the Metropolitan Council. Thank you, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councilmember Dokar.
Councilmember Carter first. Go for it. You sure? Okay. I'm holding a number of questions. Is that okay? Thank you, Chair. Thank you for all the work that went into it. I'm really interested in the project, so I have just a number of questions that are clarifying questions. So I'll start them and I'll try to go slowly. The first question I have is just to clarify the comment that you just made that we will not be, I'm going to go back to the point, we will not be changing alignment. Would you mind clarifying that statement?
Chair Barber, council member. With the adoption of the alignment in 2021, that kind of took that out of the scope of this stage of the planning. So we, going into this stage of the planning, have already kind of assumed that that is the base alignment that we're going with. So really the scope of this planning right now was to really focus on station and platform locations. So while there is, I think, possibility in the future to do further study on that, at this time, it didn't really fit within the scope of what we were asking the community for. And Kyle, I don't know if you have any additional context for that.
Chair, council members, I think just the other point to emphasize is maybe for a little bit more context. So as Laura notes, the council adopted the alignment of the G-line in March of 2021 following a pretty robust planning exercise, Network Next, so not to be confused with Network Now, where we identified the F, G, and H lines, and then the additional 7 corridors for consideration for arterial BRT between now and 2040. So that's really where that action was taken. I think it's also important as we're looking at alignments to remember, and you'll hear more about this in a little bit with the Network Now piece, is that arterial BRT is not the only service in this corridor or that we offer that's helpful for our riders. So areas in this corridor outside of where the G line is currently operating will continue to be served by local service or by other types of service as well.
Thank you. I'm going to follow up with the second question. Can you, and I have had one-on-one emails with you also, thank you for this. Can you remind, just for the public record, remind again why the line left out Inver Grove Community College, Inver Hills Community College, and the connecting bus line, the local routes that are heading in that direction, and what service changes we're looking in that area?
Chair Barber, council member, so the reason why that the G line ends where it is today is, I think, really comes down to there are some principles that we try to enact when we're choosing alignments for arterial BRT. The first is really directness and simpleness, making sure that it's very legible for our riders to understand where the bus is going to go. And there's also, I think, a key component of making sure that there's a certain level of density along the line. So I believe, not having been a part of that Network Now process, we're really covering the denser portions of that area, whereas kind of extending further south to Inver Grove Heights, the population density just is a lot lower as you continue to move further and further out of the center cities. So that's really what we have in mind when we're thinking about alignments for BRT, is making sure that a lot of people are going to be using them. And can you remind me your second question?
What were the local routes that were in that service area that would be either increased or affected with the G line coming on board?
Some, Chair Barber, council members, on the southern end of the G line, there is the Route 68, Route 75, and then I believe there's a proposed future Metro micro service down in that area as well. I would have to probably look at a map to really speak to the exact routing of those, but those local services are being kind of evaluated through Network now and will support and supplement the G line.
And I'll add a little bit, like, for example, when we did the Orange Line, obviously that fundamentally changed things in Bloomington, Burnsville area. We reviewed all the local routes connecting to Normandale and some of those other things to make sure we're being efficient. So when we do these things and get these projects built, all of the local feeding service does get evaluated.
Thank you. And then my third question is, you mentioned bus-only lane. Is that currently being proposed? And if so, what section of the route are we proposing bus-only lanes?
Chair Barber, council members, we are not proposing bus lanes on any portion of the G line corridor. We, with the Robert Street downtown project in part with the city of St. Paul, there was an alternative on the table to include bus-only lanes in that. However, the city decided to not go forward with that. So we do not have any bus lanes planned on the corridor.
Okay, thank you. Could I follow up?
Go ahead.
I appreciate entertaining all of these questions. I am curious, one thing I am curious is, you looked at a lot of bus stops where it was in the middle of the block and it would have been a pedestrian safety issue and then ruled it out. Is it fairly common, kind of knowing going into it right away, that you would not have built a station in the middle of the street block? Is that fairly common as a planning practice to still study as an alternative?
Chair Barber, council members, we normally right off the bat would not be interested in a mid-block platform location. However, there are some station areas that get to be very challenging, where the question sometimes can become, can we find a place to have this platform fit, or do we have to altogether remove the station because there's just truly no place to put it? So, I think our starting point is to always avoid a mid-block platform location, but then try to kind of balance all of the factors. Once we kind of have all the information in front of us, trying to balance access and design and kind of choose the best option given the constraints.
Thank you. Could I?
And if I might, I think a lot of it is we get public comment and feedback and questions from businesses. And so I think we believe it's important to take a look and see. I mean, local people often know their communities well and sort of how things move. And so we evaluate it to see if it makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councilmember Drakar.
So this is more of a comment versus question, and I understand that this may be more of a missed opportunity not to extend the line beyond where it is ending right now. And I think the big question for me as a policymaker that sits on Transportation Committee and then also hears about density and land use policy within the CDC committee is sometimes I think there's a little bit of chicken and egg thing that is happening within Met Council and the policy approaches we take. And so the question about, do you build a transit line in a denser community, or do you build a line, then build communities around it? I think that's what I feel like I'm hearing a little bit of it. And living in sort of Inver Grove Heights community, I'm going to strongly advocate for the line to be extended to the Inver Hills Community College, just knowing that college and the neighborhoods around it. Because the argument that we make around, and this is not on you, this is council policy wide, the idea that we should not build certain lines because the demand isn't there. And so the question I'm always holding is, what is the vision we want for a denser community? What is the vision we want for transit versus let's build where we already have a demand? And I've heard a different version of it, and some saying, let's make a case for the denser community already that exists and then go for it. And so I lean towards the alternative, sort of like, let's build for the vision we want. And so I'm going to strongly, in future consideration, as well as my hope is in the public comment, like people would advocate for the line extending beyond where it currently is ending right now. So that's more of a general comment, and it's not for you guys to take on that work. But I see the contradiction within the council policies. So thank you.
Councilmember Carter.
Thank you. I really appreciate seeing the plan coming before us and looking forward to it being in public comment and implemented in the short, not too distant future. Thank you for the work. I wanted to ask a couple of comments about your engagement. In particular, I wondered if the 36% disability was high and if it is indicative in any way for this particular corridor.
Chair Barber, council member, I would have to follow up and see how that kind of relates to previous engagement in the past. I think my gut instinct is that seems like a more representation from that community than we've received in the past, but can follow up with you on kind of how that relates to other lines.
Above all, certainly that there was a lot of excitement about the corridor and people saying that they were in favor of this and would use this project. And I wondered how that correlated with whether we were getting new users, and in particular, if these were new disabled users who may be coming to the corridor, if there might have been any reasons. So I'm just really curious about that overall usage of the disabled community and whether this is different and whether we know anything more deeply about that. So thank you both for the specific information and any general information about our corridors overall in that regard. I also wondered, I know that you reported on the demographics in the corridor as different than what we show as the public engagement, and that there is a lot of work intending to reflect more of the community around the line. But I don't know that we saw the actual demographics. I see the demographics of the community that gave us feedback, but not of any area around the corridor. And were those available?
Chair Barber, council member, I don't have that with me now, but again, I can send that in a follow-up as well.
Okay, that would be wonderful, thank you. And I wonder if there is anything planned in the public comment period that would help us to ensure that even comment is coming from greater reflection of the community that is there.
Chair Barber, council member, during the corridor plan engagement, we work very closely with community groups along the corridor that are representative of a lot of different kind of cultural groups as well as kind of neighborhood groups. And I think that's a really key way to kind of reach some of these communities. But I think probably more to do on that. And, as we build relationships and know different groups in the corridor better, I think provides us with more opportunity to hopefully reach some different people as well.
That work is continuing, thank you. And lastly, I wonder, as you talked about the projects that were changing, or I'm sorry, the station area, so that were changing and those that were not, there was a slide, and I think I must have missed something, that showed the stations with additional analysis and no change, and the stations with recommended changes. And I don't recall, except when we get down to the Robert and Sidney, hearing about those other stations. Did I just space out and miss it?
Chair Barber, council member, we selected just kind of the top 3 really kind of higher interest locations to share. For the stations with recommended changes, many of these were kind of, I would say, smaller tweaks than kind of those three. Can definitely provide additional
I could look
information on
in.
those as well.
Good looking. All right, thank you. Thank you so very much.
Okay, Councilmember Chambers.
Thank you, Chair Barber. This question is more just kind of extending the conversation that Councilmember Dolkar had. And I had a lot of the same questions as far as the criteria and our policy decisions and how we make those. And when we did not have the network now, that allowed us to plan and build better service regardless of, let's say, density or ridership being such a big factor, that was even more stressful and frustrating. So it's really great to now have both the Network Next with the BRTs and the Network Now to fulfill some of those other things. But I did go back and see that in October 4th, 2023, we talked about the policy decisions and the foundation of the Network Now program and how we have those conversations. It might be good to maybe revisit that as we start rolling out our plans. Not necessarily repeating the whole thing, but sometimes I know I forget, but just going through that document, it was really helpful and it can help facilitate conversations with staff as well, I think.
And I will just add on, just with both Network Next and Network Now are our plans for sort of the future, but as we've got our ABRT plan, we're already talking about, rolling out the next ABRT plan. And same thing with Network Now. It captures a window of time to keep evaluating because we are going to be learning more about it tonight, but we're going to be expanding some places and we're going to find some things that don't work and find some things that work really well. Councilmember.
Right, and even more so for those of us that want to dig into the policy decision pieces and how we talk about the process of making an extension decision or something like that to extend a route. That I think that that foundational presentation would be helpful for that discussion as well.
I actually agree with that because I think one of the base principles of Network Next is we build the ABRTs in a way to upgrade our top performing lines. And that's really sort of how that base network starts. But Network Now is how do we connect into all of it? And sort of because there's a mix of prior term and new term council members, it might be good to kind of bring all that in and kind of talk about how those two things work together.
Right, and the network now allows us to avoid that chicken and egg situation that
Correct.
Councilmember Dolkar was talking about in terms of, if you don't have the demand for the ridership, how do you get it? So Network Now allows us to start building that demand, start planning for density and things like that.
Exactly, and try things in some places we haven't before, which, I think will be really, really good to see because we might find other places that fit into a program like this down the road. All right, additional questions. Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just, I want to express what I think would probably be gratitude from the cities of Maplewood and Little Canada. I used to represent them in my old district, and they were very excited when the conversation started around this, and they're very committed to it. So thank you, and I think they'll be interested in the possibility of an extension going north. And I think that would be a welcome conversation in Vadnais Heights as well. Thanks.
Okay, additional questions, comments? Just a couple of quick comments. I'm going to channel Commissioner McGuire, who will say thank you for this beautiful thing happening on the east side because she's championing it very, very often at TAB. And so I'm going to relay that. I also just want to say I really appreciated how you guys presented this by showing some of the examples of some of those trade-offs of why and where, when it makes sense to move something, when it doesn't. I think that really helps us as we're out talking about things. So I really, really appreciated that context and having that background going into this. So, all right, last call. Any questions or comments? All right, then I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2024-193.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Vento. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Kreider. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. And the motion carries. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And now we're on to business item 2024-203, which is bus hardware upgrade phase 2. And Mike Hushert? Hushert. I knew I wasn't going to get it right, but I was going to try anyhow.
It's all right. Most people don't get it right. It's fine. Okay. Good evening. This is for bus hardware upgrades. So we're looking at upgrading the IVLU, which is the computer that is used for tracking our buses, and also the MDT that the operator is interacting with. So En route is our computer-aided dispatch automated vehicle location system. It's used for real-time communication to and from the bus fleet, and it's used to monitor and manage the bus operations in the field. So En route is formerly Transit Master. They changed the name a couple years ago, and it was installed 23 years ago. So we have 5 generations of our bus computer hardware known as the IVLU. Currently, all 5 of those generations are still in use on our bus fleet. The 3 oldest generations are at their end of life. We have new system software enhancements that require buses to have the 2 latest versions. So we're working backwards from our newest to oldest, upgrading our fleet. The 2 new generations of IVLU can run a new MDT. It has an enhanced user interface, and it's required to take advantage of some of our software enhancements that we have. So some of these enhancements allow the Transit Control Center to provide better direction to our operators. It's required for using our turn-by-turn features that we're working on a pilot project for right now. It's a touch MDT with an enhanced user interface. It's a better display for service adjustment messages and notifications to the operators. And it allows our technology systems group and our radio communications group easier management of diagnostics. So it lowers the failure rate of buses for their radio system. We get better information in the Transit Control Center and also better real-time information for our customers. And these are just a couple pictures of the MDT that the operator has access to. And it's a touch screen instead of the old button pushing ones that we used to have. So this is phase 2. A majority of our fleet has already been upgraded and replaced. We have about 140 buses remaining with the older hardware. This phase will upgrade 89 of the remaining buses. And we're doing it in phases because our fleet is constantly changing. There are constantly buses coming in and out. Just with the state fair ending, I've seen emails with probably about 30 to 40 buses going back out of service. So we want to make sure that we're upgrading buses that are going to be out there and be used, not something that's going to be off in storage in 2 months. So proposed action that Metropolitan Council authorized the regional administrator to execute a sole source contract 24P223 with Vantas to provide mobile device terminals for bus upgrades in an amount not to exceed $724,793.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Councilmember Dolkar.
Thank you. This is a question I'm often asking, just to make sure I fully understand. Could you remind us why go with sole source instead of RFP?
It has to work with our current software that we have. So it has to be proprietary software through Vantas.
Oh, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, additional questions or comments? Just a quick question. So it's out on most of our fleet now. Have you gotten good feedback from the operators of the upgrades to the system and all of that?
Yeah, the new MDTs are a lot easier to managed to get through and find the options that they're looking for. And then with some of the new enhancements that we're looking at, getting turn-by-turn directions out to, some of those new operators that we're hiring so many right now is a big benefit of making sure it's on all our buses.
Good. All right, any final questions, comments? All right, seeing none, entertain a motion to approve business item 2024-203.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Carter, is there a second?
Second.
And by Councilmember Chambliss, is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, and the motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we're on to business item 2024-204, same week, which is disposition of Chicago Lake Transit Center. And we have Sonia Burseth here to present, and Kelly Jamison.
All right. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, council members. We're presenting on the disposition of Chicago Lake Transit Center. I am Sonia Burseth. I'm a senior planner in engineering facilities.
And I'm Kelly Jamison, Director of Real Estate.
So planning began in the early 2000s for an off-street transit center to provide improved passenger facilities on two ridership routes. So Route 5 on Chicago Avenue and Route 21 on Lake Street. The facility opened to customers in 2006. There is no driver restroom here and no layovers occur per the agreement. The only bus service with routing through the transit center in 2024 is Route 21. Routes 53 and 39 were older routes and they were suspended in early 2020, and those are being examined as part of Network Now. Route 5 moved out to Chicago Avenue stations when D-Line opened in 2022. And similarly, Route 21 will use the BRT line, the B-Line BRT stations when those are completed. Those changes will result in no bus service in the off-street transit center. So the realignment and straightening out of bus service provides faster and more reliable travel times. Supplemental Security began staffing Chicago Lake in September 2023 to respond to ongoing maintenance issues and concerns about safety and security. And there's no future transit need for the facility. Federal funds were used to purchase the easements and construct the transit center. The construction was part of a redevelopment that included the historic Midtown Exchange building, formerly the Sears building. But the transit center itself does not contribute to historic character. The building assets themselves, the buildings of the transit center, are fully depreciated as of 2021. And because federal funds were used on this project, we have formally requested concurrence from Federal Transit Administration with this disposition process. So we're in contact with Region 5 staff and we're providing additional information.
There are two agreements between Metropolitan Council and Midtown Exchange Commons on this property. And Midtown Exchange Commons is a joint venture partnership between Ryan Companies, Allina Health, and NDC, which is the nonprofit that runs the market. We have an easement agreement that gives us exclusive use for the shelter areas and then non-exclusive use for the roadways. Midtown Exchange Common owns the underlying fee property, so we just have easement agreements to use the property. There's also an operation and maintenance agreement. Metropolitan Council is responsible for maintaining the shelter areas, where MEC maintains the roadways, though we pay a share of snow removal and exterior costs, which is around $23,000 a year, in addition to staff time and supplemental security. One other thing to note about the easement agreements is it's very specific. It says for buses or other similar typed rubber vehicle. So there's not layover, it can't be used for anything other than a bus. In putting together our plan for this, there was many conversations around, is there a reuse for these shelters? I think over a couple of years, people talked to community members, to the fee owner, to government groups, and everyone agreed there's no other use. Probably the best use for these shelters would be a demolition when they're no longer used for transit. Generally, when a transit facility is no needed, the surplus buildings are removed or repurposed. And the other thing that we had to look at here is that the easements have no resale value on an open market. Because generally, if we don't need property, even if it's easement property, we would look at, can we bid it out and sell it to someone else? Or is there another government entity that could use these easements? And have found that there's really no other use in the open market. And so with this, our disposition strategy for real estate says that we must bring council action to declare property surplus excess, saying that there is no other use for the property. We have been working, as Sonia mentioned, with FTA to get concurrence, and their guidance is pending. The buildings are fully depreciated, but we're looking for their concurrence that there's no value to these easements. And really, the only value would be to the underlying fee owner, which is offset by the cost of demolishing the buildings. So the recommended disposition strategy in this case is to terminate the easement agreements, release the transit interests, and then demolish the buildings and restore the site.
So the proposed action, 2024-204, is that the Metropolitan Council declare the property at 2946 Chicago Avenue South, Minneapolis, surplus for disposition, authorize the Regional Transit Administrator to negotiate termination of the transit easement agreement and the operation and maintenance agreement between the Met Council and Midtown Exchange Commons LLC, and release the council's transit interests contingent on Region 5 FTA concurrence. Thank you, and I think we're able to take questions.
Great. Questions, Councilmember Chambliss?
Well, thank you for that presentation. I use the Midtown Commons area a lot because I enjoy the diversity of the building, the food, the coffee, and the other reasons that I go there. And I also drove past there after our Committee of the Whole meeting last Wednesday and saw that, the building, the shelter was closed in. My question and comment is regarding the disposition or the repurposing, the lack of repurposing for it, and what happens when that structure is demolished. The parking lot that is used by the Midtown Commons is not really, overflowing. So it's not going to overflow with, okay, we're going to put more parking spaces there. I'm concerned that it might be, if it's not repurposed, it could be a place for just kind of hanging out or tents going up and things like that because there's so much space. Is there something that I'm wondering if we should be considering either a garden area or some high plantings with plant boxes or something like that, so that it has a purpose. That is an intended purpose versus an unintended purpose. So I would like to, amend the motion to see if we can consider holding off on demolishing until we explore repurpose options a little bit further. Maybe, Met Council can, look at partnership with the gardens or something like that. So I'll put that out for discussion. And I'll, before I make the amendment.
Turn to General Manager Canderas.
Yeah, Chair Barber, I don't want to put our presenters on the spot, but certainly, just from a procedural standpoint, would welcome either Ms. Jamison or Ms. Versa's perspective on that. I can certainly chime in too. But.
Yeah, Chair Barber, Councilmember, thank you for that question. We got a lot of interesting creative ideas, and I love that one too. Just to provide a little more context to our process, the agreement that our easement agreement is pretty specific. It says it's non-transferable, so it says it's only for the Met Council. It's very specific in both the passenger easement area, to build the passenger buildings to a very specific construction set. And so because we're not the underlying fee owner, we don't own the land, any third party or new use would have to create a new agreement with the property owner, so MEC. So we did talk a little bit about that the last couple of years. We talked about Mobility Hub. Folks from Hennepin County and the Greenway were involved, and The mobility hub at Chicago Lake is a little bit of a lighter touch. There's some EV charging on Columbus Avenue. There's some city alleyway that's kind of on the south end of the site. But I guess I would say, any new use would have to work with the property owner.
And Chair Barber, if I may add, I think, and I certainly want the presenters to correct me if I am going off course, but, Chicago Lake is a really important area for us and continues to be even with this change. And we've really developed relationships with the community in that area. And so I think, even though we're proposing to take this action now, it doesn't remove us from, those future collaborations to ensure that area is safe. And, so I mean, that's not a direct solution to what you're proposing, but just want to assure that we're not, stepping away from those relationships with this action, proposed action.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate all of those considerations. But I'm wondering if maybe, I guess my concern is the demolish aspect of it. Maybe we can wait a little bit longer to do the demolishing of the building and continue whatever engagement has happened around repurposing either for Met Council purposes or others.
Yeah, Chair Barber and Council Member, and I just wanted to speak specific to demolishing the building. We had that conversation with Ryan Companies in the ownership partnership, and when you have an empty building, it instantly becomes a security issue. And so, people trying to get into the building, people hiding behind corners of the building, and they even mentioned with the one transit center closed, because there's two buildings, one is closed today, or are they both maybe closed now? But it does become security, and so community outreach reached out to Neighborhood 2, and everyone thought it'd probably be better down. Although with that being said, we are still in negotiation about the best use. NDC owns the plot next door to the MEC. So MEC owns Midtown Exchange. NDC owns the plot on the corner. It had been a building that I think through COVID or riots or whatever happened, the building was demolished, but there is redevelopment planned for that area, and having transit easements removed from this actually helps spur future development on those corners too.
All right. Councilmember Dolker?
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask, following up, just a clarifying question, because Metro Transit does, maybe it's Metro Transit or Met Council, I'm gonna use it interchangeably, have mobility hub program and team, will the easement being transferred to that team and reusing that plot of land for mobility hub, will that not satisfy the use of transit?
Councilmember and Chair Barber, I guess I would have to ask that question maybe with someone from our Office of General Counsel, but I know that the city has led a mobility hub here, so Metro Transit is leading mobility hub projects elsewhere in our system. And so there's bike parking, there's some seating kind of on the northeast area, there's that EV charging over on Columbus, and there's access to the Greenway. So, I don't know, but the agreement does say public transit vehicle with rubber tires and no overhead vehicles. So
no parking.
It's a pretty specific language, but that would be another good question to confirm.
So this feels more like a statement than a question. So I'm kind of sitting with the same repurposing question, because Mobility Hub had a vision for like locker, bike racks, a number of different things that are really hard to execute. And I am wondering, because of how high interest that traffic zone area is, and given the demographic that is around that community, like you could achieve Mobility Hub. Now I'm like thinking of the rendering graphics, like planter, Mobility Hub, lockers, multiple different things. And so I am of the same mind. Like, I think we could do a little bit of digging on the repurposing. And I also hear that you could use, but that is only if the land could be transferred to NDC or another group to really do a huge development. Otherwise, I think repurposing for something else makes more sense than only just doing demolishing and turning the land over, especially because we already have the easement. Okay, that was a statement.
Sorry. Councilmember Pacheco.
Yes, Madam Chair, I actually was speaking to what you referred to, and then having more opportunities when the building's down. For 10 years, I was managing local government relations for Xcel Energy and had a lot of properties. And we had structures on them, some didn't, but the cleaner you can make it, the better opportunities for either the neighbors to look at it and see potential, or we have a better view of it, because keeping an empty building is difficult at best. And then again, it stifles creativity on what you're doing there. And that's a very busy area there, and have just the structure there just doesn't, because I think you would have more options. You would be able to put a garden or some other things, because otherwise you're going to give it to a nonprofit or a city, and they're going to have the same problem. And they're going to have to raise funds to do something different as well. But I'm just saying, that just keeping a vacant lot is sometimes better than keeping an abandoned building.
Councilmember Carter.
Thank you. I am all over the place, but in the middle, I'm hearing a policy question. And, agreeing that it's not great to have a vacant building left standing, and that way it could become a target for vandalism or other misdoings. And at the same time, I feel as though here at the Metropolitan Council and with Met Transit, we have a lot of opportunities to see land, to inhabit land, to leave land. And on the leave part, I think we want to always leave it better than we found it. And so there's a policy question here for me about how we dispose. What Metropolitan Council's mores around disposal of property are. While I support going ahead and declaring this property surplus for disposition and moving forward toward the demolition, getting rid of the arrangement that we have with MEC, I do have that same question. So what happens next? I don't want to see something awful happen on property that we once owned, that for now, for some reason, is left vacant, looks not purposed, and it becomes even a shambles. So I think I would want to ask whether we would have the opportunity to, in taking this action, also look toward an understanding as a partner in the neighborhood of what happens next on this property. And if we might have a consideration in the future of a policy position, a recommended policy position for the council when we do dispose of property. So it's a question.
I'll make a comment, you can correct anything. The big difference with this property and this discussion, we don't own the property. And so
Yes,
we have
correct.
policies and principles in place when we have a property that we're working on. This one is different because we don't own the land.
And if I might, I would just say that is correct, and I do understand that. Had forgotten it for a minute, but thank you. I would still ask the question that when we leave land, even if we leave it to the prior owner, we leave it in a way that helps us to partner with and/or simply understand its next use, or what will happen in the interim.
Just a quick comment, I think to Councilmember Pacheco's point, sometimes we're not going to know what's there until we've removed the structures and the locals or local governments or local entities see what could be. It's a good conversation to have, and I think going into the future, when we're talking about Network Now, coming up here shortly, there are some parking rides that are no longer going to be parking rides. Some of it's on land we own, some of it's not. And, so how are we going to look at some of those things into the future? So it'll be something that, as we progress the discussion, and maybe we have you back to come talk about some of this to, kind of discuss some of those options, because I think it's not the last time we have this conversation. This one's just in a different space because it's not land we own. All right, additional questions. Councilmember Tyrone
I
Carter.
was just wondering, what's the term of the easement?
The length?
Yeah.
Councilmember and Chair Barber, it's a perpetual ongoing easement, so there's no term ending.
Yeah. Do you have to renew within a certain period to extend or it automatically extends?
It's enduring, so it is a property right. It stays with the land forever. Even if MEC were to sell, the easement is still there. And so the only way to get out of the easement is to terminate it.
No, go ahead. I was going to propose like a new amendment to the thing, so I think you should go ahead.
No, what I
Councilmember Cameron.
Okay. So, to Councilmember Carter's point, I think the opportunity to really exercise that influence is while we still have the easement agreement in place. And if we are thinking that we want to exercise influence over the future of the property, that it would be in the renegotiation of that easement rather than at, once releasing disposition of the property and then hoping that the best comes of it. And so I think that I would just offer that response as we're thinking about this conversation.
Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I trust Ryan and Midtown Exchange and the city of Minneapolis to figure this out. I think going forward, if we want to take a look at policies or guidelines, that's good. But I personally think we need to pass this motion tonight unamended and get this taken care of. I think the concerns that, and the experience you had, Councilmember Pacheco, when working with Excel is instructive, and I think the concerns with regard to safety and security at this site is also critically important. Our transit police and the city of Minneapolis police have enough on their hands without having to take care of what's going on at this site. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate the discussion regarding the amendment. I think that I would like to propose that that we delay a decision on this until we have seen more information about the opportunities for the repurposes that were considered prior, because we didn't have that in our presentation today, at least, until the next Transportation Committee meeting.
Councilmember Dolkar.
I was going to, it feels like two different questions. One is the demolishing of the existing transit center, which I think fully in agreement, everybody supports it. And then the second is termination of the easement. And so my amendment to the proposed action.
We're still on, no,
Sorry,
like,
okay.
we would still actually need a second to Reva's first amendment, which we never got completely clarified.
Okay, let me restate it. I would like to let me just look at the, can you put up the proposed action? I propose that we delay authorizing the disposition and negotiating the termination of the transmit easement agreement until we receive more information from staff.
Right. So it's not really an amendment, it's just delaying it. So is the proper word delay or postpone?
Postpone to a
Okay.
specific.
Yeah, postpone then.
To a specific.
Okay,
So I
to a
withdraw
specific date.
my jumbled amendment for that recommendation.
Okay, to the next Transportation Committee?
Yes.
Okay.
With additional information about the engagement and feedback regarding repurposing, as well as some of the other pros and cons and trade-offs.
Councilmember Pacheco.
Sure, Madam Chair. This has nothing to do with tearing the building down. The motion has nothing to do with tearing the building down, as I see it, unless I'm wrong, but it's, this is just to determine that this is no longer, property is no longer used, and that we're expecting to release it from what it sounds, but there's no building destruction or removal. Am I correct?
I believe part of termination of the lease is we have to remove the buildings and restore it. I'm not a lawyer.
Chair
so-
Barber, I mean, what's unique about this one is If this was another government entity that was the underlying fee owner, we could just say we're going to give it to you, but because it's a private party nonprofit group, we need your permission because disposition policy says we do an open bid, we give to another government entity, we use it for TOD. And so this is another use that serves the council's purpose the best. So we are asking for permission to terminate the easement so that the easement goes back to the underlying fee owner. And then the demolishing really was just what mutual parties had agreed to. But we don't need an action to demolish. We could just have an action to terminate.
All right, so I'm going to propose the language and then so it's, Madam Chair, I move that the committee consideration of business item 2023-204 same week be postponed to the committee's next meeting on, what is it, September 23rd, 2023.
Thank you.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. No. And the motion carries. Thank you. All right, we are on to business item 2024-215, same week, public hearing on proposed network mail concept plan, service expansion. And we have Adam Harrington.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members. I'm Adam Harrington. I'm the Director of Service Development. And I'm here tonight to propose an action that the council authorized us to take Network Now and discontinued service out for public hearing and comment that we would begin on September 12th, presuming your approval and the council's approval. So I have a few slides here to help understand the path that we've been on, and it's been a good discussion this evening that touched on this project a number of times. And so I'll just review some of them. Why we're doing this project now, as you all know and have talked about this evening, we've had a lot of changes in the past 4 years. And right now, we're looking back on the rearview mirror all the way back to 2020 when we had some suspended service. And that's one of the key elements that we're addressing as part of this action, how we deal with those and how we recommend our changes. We've had travel pattern changes over the last 4 years that have been significant for our service and for our customers, namely the dominance of remote work for a lot of office employees. We have a workforce element to this plan that we're continuing to hire. We're making some good progress this last couple of years in hiring bus operators and other support staff. And we have this great opportunity with the sales tax that we were just awarded in order to expand our system and grow the service in the transitways. So that's really about the timing for why now and why out to 2027, which is really a near-term vision for how we improve our redesigned service, more frequency and span on those existing routes, so the redesign routes, implementing metro lines. I'm sure most of you have heard about microtransit and our expansion ideas there. And again, our public hearing element is really the focus of resolving the status of suspended routes and facilities. Going back to 2023, where we did a lot of work in defining what our performance is of our existing service, reviewing our policy for how we plan our service, and a robust engagement period in 2023 where we went out to our communities, we met with people, we had surveys, and we had about 6,000 comments come back to us to help inform what the Establishing the Foundations report is and the principles, which as you mentioned earlier this evening, were adopted by you to help us inform our planning process. One of the key changes that I mentioned is the change in commute patterns and how people use transit and transportation in general. And this chart on the slide here represents the difference between how the travel patterns of ridership on our service changed from 2019, which is that light gray line that shows ridership over the course of the day. And those two peaks in there represent the 2019 AM rush hour, midday, and then the PM rush hour. Those are the highest ridership points of the day. Now that ridership pattern is that darker line and it shows something a little bit different. We do have a little bit of a peak in the morning and afternoon, but it's really broadened over the afternoon, and that pattern looks a lot like it does on Saturdays and Sundays as well. So it's just emblematic of the changes that we've seen in travel pattern that really inform a lot of the changes we're proposing here. Just a reminder that all of those inputs that we developed over 2023 inform these principles that we brought to you last year, adapting service changes to the travel markets, preparing for implementing the metro lines and high-frequency service, maintaining the reliability of our service and growing to the scale of our workforce, building on the success of ridership and where we grow it. And a lot of that is on those local all-day, all-purpose routes that we've seen the biggest growth in our ridership and rebounding. And of course, providing access to the communities that we serve. So hopefully you'll see some of these things as we move through the planning process. This is just a time check on where we are in the project. And our next step is really to get back to the communities and do some full engagement so that we can hear from them how they think our plan suits their needs and our future designs for the next couple of years. We'll certainly take those comments back and then modify the plan and bring this project back to you and the full council in early '25. So a couple key takeaways. Again, this is our vision for how we want our network to look in 2027. If we implement everything that's in this plan, it's a 35% increase in the service we offer when you consider all the different types, whether it's bus, rail, or microservice. It's a great expansion of coverage in our region, and we're looking at, again, how we manage those different changes in travel patterns as part of this. So building on the principles that we've identified, growing ridership, we have a lot of new service improvements that focus on frequency, span of service, and a lot of weekend service that is proposed to be added as well. You'll see here that 15 routes improved to 50 minutes or better service levels throughout a weekday. We know in our transit industry that when we provide service that's every 50 minutes or better, it really improves the attractiveness of that service. And in fact, if it's every 10 minutes or better, that improves it that much more. And so you can see from this diagram that's on this page, which is also in the report, which will be released this Thursday, where we've improved local BRT and LRT service back up to 10-minute frequencies. So we're really excited to be able to move in that direction. And we are right now moving in that direction incrementally as we hire additional staff. Additional service coverage, 8 new micro zones. I'll just point your attention to the map on the right, which is really about where we're improving frequency and coverage on our network. And those shaded green areas, which I have another slide about in more detail, hopefully illustrates how we're trying to connect some of our lower density communities where fixed route can't really reach everyone that we'd like to connect them into the transit center or Transitway metro station throughout our project. And overall, when you add all this together, we improve job access by 25% across our network. And you'll see that this will vary by part of the region once we get into the plans, but it's a really significant investment in our system. The metro lines, which I know you're all familiar with, but this map on the right highlights in yellow those projects that we'll be implementing by the end of 2027. And you heard about G-Line earlier today, and we're showing the Phase 1 northern part of G-Line, which is on Rice Street, but includes Gold Line, B-Line, E-Line, G-Line, and of course, Green Line Extension LRT service in 2027. Maintain the reliability of our service. One element is adding service to the scale of workforce growth, but another element is improving the speed and reliability of our service. And that's everything from BRT improvements, and this diagram on the lower right here is Lake Street for B-Line. You see the red paint for those bus lanes. But what are those elements of BRT that we can apply to other locations where we don't have the ability to apply every aspect of that? So we've got good work going on there, and you'll be hearing more about better bus routes, which is our approach to evaluating local routes and making improvements to those as well. Adapting service to travel patterns. I mentioned the travel pattern changes. We're focusing in network now, our commuter express network, to something we're calling the Key Express network. And that's where we're drawing attractiveness to our core express routes on every one of those primary freeway corridors where there's an existing parking facility that has good capacity, so that we can improve the frequency of those routes, offer midday service, so that there's more flexibility for commuters to come in and out of the downtowns and the University of Minnesota. Part of making all this happen and recognizing those changes, and you'll see in the business item, includes suspending, discontinuing the 53 routes that are suspended. 44 of those are commuter express routes, and most of those were 3 to 5 trips a day and doing a lot of local pickup in the neighborhoods. Most of our customers who ride that service do have alternatives. They either have cars that they drive to park and rides to get to those local routes, or in some cases where we have commuter express routes in the urban area, we now have Orange Line BRT, or we have D Line. That's an opportunity for our customers to take advantage of instead of those limited stop commuter express routes. We have 8 routes restored as part of this that are part of the overall network, and a number of restructurings that cover some of these areas, and the list of routes of the key express network is here. So you see on the map, hopefully it represents every corner of the metro area, and again, that connection with the micro zones as well. And here's just looking at the micro zones standalone. Our goal is to implement the Rosedale A-Line microzone and the Woodbury Gold Line microzone by the end of this year. And thank you for your support for that and previous actions that MTS has brought forward this fall, actually in July, to get the operator and coming back to advance the software provider as well. So the other zones that are identified here have not been refined. We spent quite a bit of time working with Woodbury and adjacent communities, as well as Roseville and adjacent communities, to define those boundaries. And so we'll continue to do that as we move across the region and better refine those zones. Our goal is to provide service that can arrive upon request within 20 to 30 minutes, should there be a successful trip match. And that's done by constraining the geography. With 5 vehicles operating in each one of these, that's really how those things come together in order to make a pilot like this successful. So putting together the commuter-oriented service changes, the red lines on this map represent those discontinued routes that many of which are discontinued right now suspended right now. There's only one that's operating today that would be discontinued, and that is a Route 501 that goes from Mall of America and connects up to Route 515, 2 trips in the morning and afternoon with about a handful of people who were riding in. But hopefully this represents good coverage to each one of these corridors that park and riders can take advantage of. Here's the network of all the discontinued service that we're recommending when you look at only those routes. And remember, this is a lot of highway nonstop segments that you're seeing here as well, and the associated park and rides that would need to be disposed of as well when we go through this process. But when we layer everything together, we have a lot of new service that we've invested here, and we'll continue to do that. We're excited to really jumpstart some of these projects as well, starting with Orange Line is really coming to full fruition at the end of this year. We have a number of local route improvements that we're aiming to bring back as well. Engagement, key part of this process, as we did in 2023, we'll be doing again now. There are many aspects of this. Our official public hearing that's part of this business item is October 29th. We have a number of meetings and other ways for customers and communities to engage with us, and we'll be out meeting with people throughout the region and already have been starting to tee up those conversations. So we're excited to do that. We do want to hear back from people about their thoughts and ideas so that we can really consider how we might want to modify what we're proposing here so that we can make changes and bring it back to the council in early 2025. Here are a list of all the meetings that are officially sponsored by Metro Transit, including the public hearing on October 29th. And I'll just reiterate, all comments that we receive, whether someone attends a meeting or not, will be considered with the same weight. So even if a customer can't make a meeting, if they can get information back to us via survey or email or phone call, we're happy to take that information. And lastly, this is the timeline. We're happy to have this meeting today that says August 26th, because we haven't updated the slide for this version, but we're excited to be able to move this forward, and it's a same week item for the council because of that. But the official public input process is September 12th through November 15th, and we're also happy to be kind of in partnership with G-Line and the BRT staff as we'll be taking those comments in as well and thinking about how everything fits together. So with that, the proposed action is that the Met Council authorizes a public hearing to accept comments to the proposed Network Now concept plan, service expansion, and discontinuation of suspended routes. Be happy to take questions.
Great. Thank you, Adam. Questions and comments? Councilmember Chambliss.
Did I hear right on the next steps? The same week is to the council this week from today's meeting. So the actual slide would change from August 26th to September 9th. Okay.
Right. Councilmember Dolker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have feedback, and then I'll follow up with the questions. Just on feedback, on the public meetings, I understand these are the Met Council sponsored meeting. I'm wondering if we could extend the options for virtual meetings. The public comment period is open till November 15th, but all the meetings are held in October. So maybe extending some online virtual options in November would be a good. The second comment, these are all feedback. The second sort of feedback I have is, I appreciate all the meetings that are happening in Minneapolis, St. Paul, but also in the suburban or communities where we know we are extending transit options, but that are not reflected here. I think those, and it could be Met Council sponsored meeting, or if there's already an existing meeting, and just gonna throw it out there. I don't know if there is one, like if Dakota Chamber was holding a meeting, just being there, I think that would serve the purpose. Just wanting to make sure that staff have face time with community groups that are outside of St. Paul, Minneapolis is what I'm thinking. The other quick thing that I have a question is, Adam, you may have already covered this in one of the previous Transportation Committee meeting, and I missed it. The green shaded area for micro-transit ideas, and I know there are a lot of enthusiasm for it within the Transportation Advocacy Group, and it's something that they have thought about for a really long time. I'm wondering how we got to this. Are they all connected to a BRT, or is it based on some other principles or criteria in how we came up with the shaded areas?
Madam Chair, Councilmember, it's a great question. It's a change for how we've been operating our current microservice in North Minneapolis. We're really trying to focus on how we provide access into the transit system in areas that might be more difficult. So yes, anchoring on both the transit center or transit way station. So in your area, that would be the Dakota County Service Center, and really trying to anchor those communities in. The other thing I'll mention is that those shaded circles are really just placeholders. We haven't had the conversation where if it looks like a circle, we haven't had the conversation with the community about what's the right surface area.
Okay, thank you. Could I follow up with a comment? So not for today or something that needs to be solved for today, but I think I'm going to channel Councilmember Vento and Gail Siderbruggs. One of the things that they have often talked about is the need for transit in the areas they represent, which tends to be edge of the suburban communities. And they're seeing aging population, and there's metro mobility, but those who are not eligible for metro mobility, microtransit is actually a really good option. So maybe not something that could be done this year, but something I would like to look forward to is no matter where you live within the 7 metro county, that you have an access to transit. And if microtransit system, depending on how we pilot this or put this into motion, if this is something that could serve that purpose for some of the community and families and households that are living outside of the frequent services, I think that would be good. Just throwing it out there.
Councilmember Cameron.
Yeah, to that question, I actually was very excited to see the plan on microtransit because of the locations, both serving areas where there are transit deserts in suburban communities. I think of the Brooklyn Park area as needing more support in transportation, as well as areas where we're being, really planning around it. I know that I have personally heard from so many people about planning transportation around some of our major projects that we are developing, and I've raised this with staff before about, thinking about Southwest and how we are going to accommodate transportation once that line is in place. And so I'm really, really pleased to see this network. I say the only negative is that you are cutting the route right in front of my house. I'm a little disappointed by that, but really excited to see where transportation is growing and that it is growing across the suburban region, that we are thinking about not only where transit is now, but where we would like it to be and where it will be in the future.
Thank you. And we'll send out references for when we talked about Metro, Micro, and these zones, and when we authorized it, so you have it. Councilmember Chambliss.
Yeah, I'm very excited about the opportunity that was presented today, the multiple opportunities. And part of my excitement is the phased implementation timeline from 2024 with Roseville and what's the other city? Woodbury, thank you. And then, like, what is it going to be? There are going to be some micro transits in 2025, some in 26, 27, or do we wait to even look at that? Because we've already gone so quickly with the Roseville and Woodbury option. It makes me think that we could probably do the same thing with other areas.
Madam Chair, Councilmember, the current plan is to advance 2 additional ones per year. So that's our goal. All of this is contingent upon workforce hiring primarily. So we think we're in good shape right now, because if we look at the last 6 to 9 months, things are positive. But we'll be prioritizing things as we go. If we turn the page to January 2025, we wouldn't be able to do all this stuff. It really takes people to do. So we'll be scaling up to it, and I think we're actually in a really good position to do that.
Thank you. Additional questions or comments? I would just say thank you, and I've been looking forward to this for a very long time. I think that, when with the last transportation omnibus bill, part of it was look, invest, grow, have a vision. This is looking, investing, growing, having a vision. That's what we see here. It's being realistic about what was working, what wasn't working, knowing that things fundamentally changed after the pandemic. But it's also making sure that we're trying some new things in new areas. It's sort of to the earlier conversation on ABRT. It's when these routes become the high performing routes that you change them and upgrade them to an ABRT system. And so this is really, I think, exciting. And no one likes when routes are cut, and I'm sure there will be people who will be sad. And I know we've all gotten packets of information for routes that were affected in your districts. If anyone has questions, definitely reach out and ask. We can get more information for each of them. But I think really what this is, in my mind, is just a great step forward. So thank you. If there's no other questions, then I'll entertain a motion to approve business item 2024-2 and 5, same week.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Carter. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Bento. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thanks, Adam. Thank you. All right, we are on to our last business item, 2024-220, same week, which is an authorization to purchase property, and we have Jim Harwood here to present. And I know we still have 2 information items, but because we had to squish everything into this meeting, we're going to continue on, if you guys don't mind. So, all right, go ahead, Jim.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and council members. I'm Jim Harwood, the Assistant Director of Engineering Construction in our Engineering Facilities Department. I'm here today to present business item 2024-220. The proposed action of that item is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to purchase the property at 755 Industrial Boulevard in Minneapolis for the purpose of material warehousing in an amount not to exceed $26.5 million. Excuse me. So as our transit system continues to grow and expand, so does our need for inventory of spare parts and materials to support those growing operations. For the last several years, we've been doing that primarily out of our warehouse facility, or out of a warehouse section of our overhaul base maintenance facility in St. Paul. There's a 2-story section there that we use for material management and inventory warehousing. In about 2020, we also began to lease additional space, about 20,000 square feet in Roseville, to keep up with that growing inventory that primarily supports light rail. And currently, again, today, we are operating at a space deficit, or bursting at the seams, if you will, and are not set up to support the growth of our transit system in the coming years. A few years back in engineering facilities, we completed a plan called our Support Facility Strategic Plan, which really looked at our proposed facility needs to support and accommodate the planned growth of the transit system. One of the main priorities identified as part of that work was the need for this facility for a new centralized material management warehouse facility, and we added funds to our 5-year capital improvement program accordingly. This past winter, we engaged with Council's real estate office to help us find properties, either for lease or for sale, that met our long-term program needs. Over 20 properties were evaluated, and staff has determined that this facility at 755 Industrial Boulevard best meets the criteria based on size, amenities, price, and location. Based upon that review and the review of a council-hired appraisal, staff have determined that a market price of $26.5 million is fair and reasonable and in the best interest of the council. The funding for this item is contingent on the budget amendment that was on the consent agenda earlier in this meeting. So again, the proposed action here for this business item is the council authorized the regional administrator to purchase the property at 755 Industrial Boulevard in Minneapolis for the purpose of material warehousing in an amount not to exceed $26.5 million. And with that, I can take any questions.
All right, thank you. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I entertain a motion to approve business item 2024-220, same week. So moved. Moved by Councilmember Dolkar. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Chambliss. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thanks, Jim. All right, so that ends our business for the evening. I would say the tip would be non-consent. Item 2 can go consent. G-line, non-consent. Hardware can go consent. We postponed the disposition of Chicago Lake Street, and the last 2 items are non-consent because they're same week. Everyone agrees? Okay. All right, then we can move on to our information. So we have asset management update with Kristen Thompson.
Good evening, Chair and Council members. I think it's evening now, not afternoon. My name is Kristen Thompson. I'm the Director of Asset Management for Metro Transit, and I'm here today with my annual update on the asset management program here at Metro Transit. So I'll start by providing a little bit of background information about transit asset management and then share about the asset management context at Metro Transit, provide you with some examples of ongoing work, and then a look ahead for what's coming in the next couple of years. This is the FTA's definition of asset management. They provide a lot of guidance on this subject, and I like this definition because it is helpful to kind of break down the concepts of what asset management is in the world of transit. The first bullet indicates that it's a strategic and systemic practice, so that is to say it's not a one-time exercise, it's not something we do and set aside, never come back to. It's really embedded into our everyday work at Metro Transit and accordingly impacts a lot of business processes, which I'll speak about. The second bullet touches on procuring, operating, inspecting, maintaining, rehabilitating, and replacing transit capital assets. So again, pretty much everything we do in transit is touched by asset management. And that's with the purpose of managing performance risks and costs over the asset's life cycles for the purpose of providing safe, effective, and reliable public transportation, which is what we all want to do here at Metro Transit. So these are the kind of baseline transit asset management requirements from the FTA. First of all, we are required to submit a transit asset management plan every 4 years. The last plan was submitted in 2022, and some of you may recall there was an information item about that at that time. It includes, for a larger agency like ours that has multiple modes, it includes those 9 elements on the left to indicate that we are kind of conceptualizing and planning and strategizing around our assets. So what inventory do we have? How are we making decisions? What's our policy? What are our strategies? On the right, we are providing annual reporting to the National Transit Database that represents the implementation of asset management. So it's again kind of an update on the inventory. How are we doing with performance? What are our targets for the upcoming year? What has been happening in our system in the past year that might have impacted those results? Taking a step a bit beyond those baseline requirements, this is a concept of how asset management may be organized across business processes. So there's sort of those 3 pillars of business processes. Policy and strategy speaks to the guidance and overall direction that the agency is setting. Lifecycle management speaks to kind of the core, what you think of as maintenance activities, so understanding what are the assets that we have, what condition are they in, and how do we best care for them. And then cross-asset planning represents activities to manage a budget and planning and performance across different asset groups. Underpinning all of those columns are those 2 bars. The first is information technology systems. In order to perform all this work, it's really important that we have good data about our assets and that we're able to track it. And then enablers are things like training, culture, and leadership that help support the activities. Getting into our context here at Metro Transit, I will say the FTA guidance originated kind of responding to older legacy systems that had a lot of assets that were aging and degrading, and the agencies didn't have a good plan to manage that process. Of course, our blue line is 20 years old this year, so we have assets that are starting to age, but we are a system that's expanding. So asset management helps us to take care of the system that we have today and then also help to look ahead and manage the assets that we're bringing into the system in the future. You can see the table on the right is just a snapshot of some asset types that we're thinking about, in many cases doubling or even doubling or more the volume of the assets that we're going to be managing as we build out to our 2030 vision. In Metro Transit, as at many transit agencies, we have multiple work groups managing assets. While it's not unique to us, it's just another factor we have to, it speaks to the need for coordination and consistency across the organization. And lastly, we do have outdated technology tools currently that we're using to manage assets. So I'll speak to that and what we're working on to help address that. Looking ahead to the future, we know that new assets are going to increase our maintenance responsibilities and our future financial commitments. Below are just a few of the ways that asset management can help support us as we move into that future. For one, as we are in the startup mode for new service, having strong processes to bring data into our systems and help us manage our assets well from day one is one piece we're working on. As I mentioned, we're working on implementing modern technology tools that will help us to manage work and our reporting on our assets. And then lastly, that will flow into capital planning tools that help us support decision-making for longer-term investments and rehabilitation needs for assets. Prior to 2022, asset management at Metro Transit was kind of distributed to a few individuals around the organization. So when I started in 2022, that really represented the first effort to form a group that would help support agency-wide activities in this space. So we're functioning more or less as a startup right now and still kind of getting into the groove of what we can do to best support these activities and support the organization. Some early areas of focus have been obviously program development, the technology and data tools piece, some process improvements, and capital planning support. We are currently a small team, but growing. We have a program manager for asset management, and then we are building a data and technology group, including GIS specialists, and then we have some vacant positions for business analysts and business systems analysts that we're working to fill. Of course, we're not doing this work alone. We are partnering extensively every day with maintenance work groups, with finance, with strategic initiatives to help implement what we're trying to get to. Because of the nature of the work and our structure, we're also partnering with other parts of the council, like Metropolitan Transportation Services, supporting their practices, working with IS and ES on technology projects. We also rely a lot on industry resources like the Federal Transit Administration and other organizations to help us get access to best practices and also exchange information with peers about how they're doing things. I'm going to shift gears and talk about some of our larger initiatives, and you'll notice the change in PowerPoint template here. This is a council project that we have been involved with since day one, called the Enterprise Asset Management Solution Project. So both Metro Transit and Environmental Services are using very outdated work management systems, over 20 years old in both cases. So this is both a technology and a process project that we are collaborating across the council to replace those systems and also update and align our processes so that we can leverage those systems, the new system and its capabilities. So this project will help us both to manage asset-related work, but then also improve our ability to make decisions and plans. Some of the benefits of the new tools, the ones I always narrow in on are the staff-friendly aspect. We hear a lot about how unwieldy and un-user-friendly the current tools are, and they really don't do what we need them to do. So we won't just have modern interfaces, we'll have totally revolutionized capabilities. Mobile capabilities are a big one. The ability to connect our assets to their geographic location, and mapping is a big one. Then you can see there's sort of a theme of reporting and processes as well that will be improved through these new tools and the surrounding work. So this is a substantial project and it's a long one. We've been working on this for a while. We started with really getting a baseline understanding of what are the needs of the council as it relates to asset management. What's the landscape? What are we trying to do with the system? And then drilling into more sort of functional detail as we've developed the requirements. So we are currently towards the end of phase 2, which is we are in the middle of an RFP process to select an implementer for a new system. We expect to have that implementer on board early next year, and then we'll be implementing in 2025 and 26. Coming into this project, we knew that we couldn't wait till the new AIM system was here in order to make improvements that would help support our partners, the business units that take care of our assets every day. So in the meantime, we took sort of that startup mindset and looked for opportunities to leverage the tools that we already have or make improvements that would help us build towards the new system. So the next couple examples relate to that kind of mindset. As first example, we partnered with the facilities maintenance team in the engineering and facilities group to improve how their data is structured in our current system, which is called TAAC Space, which would help the supervisors manage the work better. We help them implement prioritization tools, and we help them with some reports that would help them see what work was done or still needed to be done. Just kind of basic functionality improvements that leverages the tools that we already have. Another example in this vein is the Geographic Information Systems Asset Data Work Plan. Early on, we did some engagement with the business units to learn more about what GIS data related to assets we already had, how confident were we in it, what was still missing that would help make the day-to-day business, help get things done more easily. So we identified some opportunities and have taken some initial steps to develop this asset data GIS program. Some initial outcomes here, we leveraged a state contract to collect underground utility data for 15 of our support facilities. We've developed a data structure and processes together with our IS team so that we're kind of set up well to add additional data in the future. We are expanding our department's capacity for this work by adding positions and purchasing equipment, all so that we can start to take on a more active role with this. In addition to being a stepping stone towards the AIM system, this has also provided immediate benefit to the business. For example, we have obligations related to the Go for State One call process where we're responding to tickets, and having better data in our systems helps the people who are doing those locate requests have better information going into it rather than kind of flying blind. So we've been able to help support, make some changes to help support business needs already. Shifting gears away from the data and technology areas, another initial area we've been working on is to support capital planning. So Metro Transit has historically had a 6-year CIP, as you all know. We did, even before I entered, had a practice of projecting longer term for rail capital maintenance needs. So the asset management team took on sort of the updates to that plan, but in addition, over the past 18 months, worked to develop a long-range projection for BRT system assets, since they are becoming a very substantial part of our system. So that first effort kind of illustrated, it was more actually complex than the rail because of different lines involved and the many different types of assets. So we've learned a lot through that process. So we're going to be working to improve our methodology over time, because those projections get updated regularly, and then expand to additional assets as needed. Just to give you an idea of what this work looks like, this is kind of a simplified example. We start by identifying the assets that we want to include in the projection, whether those be existing or future planned assets. For example, here, Metro H line requiring 33 buses for service launch. Then we work with the experts in the business units to identify some assumptions around replacement timelines, refurbishments, what the projected costs may be. So again, these are kind of simplified numbers, but for buses, we might refurbish them every 6 years, then replace after 12, and then use inflation to kind of project forward what those costs may be in the future. So these are high-level projections, but they do support financial planning that the finance team does. And then also it feeds into the department's CIP process. As they see these projects kind of coming down the pike, they can start to refine the numbers so they have a good estimate once we enter the CIP process. So looking ahead the next 2 years, we are expecting to continue to be very busy. So the EAMS implementation will be a big focus of our work for the next few years. Also coming up in 2026, we will have a revision to the asset management plan due to the FTA, and this will be the first one since our sales tax funding was approved in 2023. So I think we'll want to kind of revisit that plan and how we frame it and structure it to kind of reflect the change in our circumstances there. And then lastly, we're going to continue to grow and develop the team to be sure we can support the asset management needs of the organization going forward. So with that, I do look forward to coming back next year with more updates, and I'd be happy to take any questions you might have today.
Okay, any questions, comments? Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Both Chair Barber and I are members of the Audit Committee, and asset management is a big overriding strategy, goal, value for the committee and for the council as a whole. And I just want to commend you for this work, Kristen. I'm particularly interested in the technology piece, as the growing concerns around technology being compromised in any number of ways grows. I always worry about what it could do to our environmental system, our HRA system, all of the material information we have there, and as well our transit system. It's just crucial for us to be as up-to-date and secure as possible. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay. Anything in addition? I just want to thank you as well. I think this is an area that we have a lot of votes on and things like that, and it's a lot of where a lot of our investment and funds go to, and so it's really important to kind of get grounded in what it all means. Like, I mean, it is what keeps us operating and functioning and looking good going into the future. So it's really important to kind of have this baseline. So really appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. And we're on to then our final information item, which is the Purple Line project update. We have Craig Lamoth here.
Good evening, Madam Chair, committee members. So this evening, I'm going to give you a brief update on Purple Line that will provide you more breadth than depth. So feel free to interject with questions or save them for the end. I've got about 12 or 13 slides to get through. But we wanted to get this update to you all because some major decision points are coming up here before the end of the year. Really the revised locally preferred alternative for Purple Line that has been a work in progress now for 2+ years. Just as a reminder, when we took over the project from the county at the end of 2021, it was a 15-mile line to downtown White Bear Lake from downtown St. Paul, co-located with the Bruce Vento Trail Corridor. And then in the spring of 2022, we started looking at ways to truncate the alignment outside of White Bear Lake. At the end of that process, under the current program guidance, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, we found that there was only one federally viable endpoint, and that was ending at Maplewood Mall Transit Center. The last time the council got an update on this, got a pretty thorough update during a committee of the whole meeting in June of last year, and then a much briefer update as part of a quarterly Transitway update in September of last year. And that was really relaying what we had learned from RMS Phase 1, Route Modification Study Phase 1, and what we were planning on doing with Route Modification Phase 2, which I'll spend most of today talking about. And that was really what we started in the spring of 23, really looking at an alternative corridor for north of Maryland Avenue to Maplewood, really looking at White Bear Avenue and Maryland Avenue as an alternate to the Bruce Vento Trail corridor. So this has been about an 18 to 20 month process, and as I noted earlier, we're coming to an end, which is one of the reasons we wanted to get here tonight. We have a major decision point, a long-awaited one for many, which is, should Purple Line continue to be co-located with the Bruce Vento Trail north of Maryland, or should it operate on Maryland and White Bear Avenue? We anticipate that occurring here in October, a recommendation from our Corridor Management Committee, and then in December, another decision point or two, including northern endpoint for Purple Line. A lot of work has gone on. We really started with understanding this new corridor we were asked to look at, and then we did a lot of technical analysis, and basically most of this summer has been focused on outreach and engagement. And then we've also been dealing with other things besides just north of Maryland Avenue, but I'll talk about most of these in subsequent slides, again, giving you some breadth of what we've been working through. But as it relates to the route modification study north of Maryland, our focus is really on project partner support for a revised LPA. It's often difficult to switch gears on the fly, and that's essentially what we've been doing for the last year and a half, looking at a completely different corridor for Purple Line. As part of that discussion is whether or not center running or side running bus lanes should be the mechanism that we use. And then south of Maryland Avenue, we halted design last spring as we were asked to look at this new corridor, but there are a few things that we've been continuing to work on, including Arcade Street Station, and I'll talk more about that in a moment, but really focusing on getting district council and community support for the location. And then also coordination with Walk-On TP's daylighting Phelan Creek project, specifically Reach 6. The other hot topic that we've been working through is the proposed capital investment grant program policy guidance, which happens about once every 10 years. So first on Arcade Street, I'll note that more time, energy, and money has been spent on this one station location than all of the other station locations combined. Really since 2018, about 30 different routing and station locations have been contemplated and discussed. Some have been put in writing as conceptual designs. We've done some additional work here this spring on looking at really TOD potential around the Arcade Street station. And this is all to try to find the best transit solution that is responsive to what the community's expectations are. Where we find ourselves at the end of the day is that we're going to continue forward with the design that is shown on this screen, what we call the A2 option. This is the best of the technically feasible and financially fundable options. We gave a much longer update last week to the Corridor Management Committee about the TOD study, which involved engagement with Glimsher Group, who owns Seegers Square, which is a majority of the property around this area. So we are planning on elevating the station so it's up at the grade of Nide Lane. We just achieved 30% design in July on this. It also accommodates the daylighting project Walk-On TP is leading. To the west of Arcade, you'll see that in the image on the left in a dotted dashed line. They haven't really advanced design on this, but we understand enough about where they approximately want this. And then on the visualization on the right, you'll note the overpass over a relocated or realigned Bruce Vento Trail. North of that, there's shown a grassy area that is adequately width to accommodate a daylighting creek project in the future. As I noted, it's going to be a very busy fourth quarter for us. October 14th is the day we're expecting a action by the Corridor Management Committee recommending which route alignment the Purple Line should be in, either stay co-located with Bruce Vento Trail north of Maryland or move to Maryland and White Bear Avenue as part of a roadway reconstruction project. In December, we have not, we need to reschedule that meeting, so a date has not been identified. It could be as late as December 20th, but that's really to address northern endpoint, which could be at least Maplewood, and could be Vadnais Heights and Century College, one of those two endpoints as well. And then knowing what route we're on is only half the battle. We need to know what the community wants. Side versus center is almost equally important. Without these three decisions, we can't move back into the design phase. So we've just concluded 60 days of public engagement, started right after Independence Day and concluded right before Labor Day, of really sharing what we had learned about the two corridors and discussing that with the public and soliciting preference over which corridor they believe the Purple Line should be in. There's differences in length of route, number of stations. Frequency would be the same for both. Ridership is different between the two corridors, as is cost. They're both eligible for future federal funding. There are differences in traffic operation impacts. As you can imagine, operating on an urban street is different than operating in a former freight rail corridor. There are differences in property impacts. There's also differences in construction. If we're on the White Bear Avenue corridor, it will be 3 years of construction, not 2 years of construction. Transit travel time end to end is different depending on what corridor you're in. The Bruce Vento Trail corridor has 1/3 less stations, and therefore it's faster between stations, and it is also fully dedicated, so it is faster. There are fewer destinations in the Bruce Vento Trail corridor and more destinations, as you can imagine, in an urban street corridor that are accessible within a 10-minute walk or roll. White Bear Avenue has more transit-supported development today and is anticipated in getting more. And then between the two corridors, we're talking about two completely different projects. Building a transit way in what is now a trail corridor, backing up to people's backyards, versus a full roadway reconstruction project that would replace the sidewalks, back of sidewalk, all the way across the street to the back of sidewalk. So replacing the boulevards, removing the trees, a full typical roadway reconstruction project. Endpoint. So in August, we brought forward to the Corridor Management Committee a peculiar, I'll put it that way, recommendation from staff as it relates to if White Bear Avenue corridor and if ending in Maplewood, where should that be? And it was really between ending at Maplewood Mall Transit Center and what you're seeing here on this image. Project staff, after a lot of careful consideration, felt very strongly that directly serving the hospital and then turn around and laying over at County Road D was the best option if certain things could happen. So this was actually a contingent recommendation. So all three contingencies must be met in order for this extension to happen. Otherwise, we would be ending at Maplewood Mall Transit Center. So there's a large proposed workforce housing project up near County Road D that came forward in May. If that is implemented, that'd provide more eyes on the station, which was a concern expressed, in an otherwise area that is relatively isolated because it's up against the freeway. It would also provide higher station usage. MHealth Fairview, which operates St. John's Hospital, has been a very big proponent of Purple Line since the beginning of the project, before we took it over. And there's always been a station at St. John's Boulevard under all the other different alignment considerations. But they are going to be expanding their campus before Purple Line likely breaks ground, doubling the size of the hospital. So our suggestion is basically us helping them help us. And so we know a lot about transit and regional hospitals. Those that have higher ridership price their parking, either for their employees and or customers. Many also do enroll in MetroPass as well, and there's a difference between those who do and those who don't. So our suggestion is MHealth take those two actions. And the last one is really within the confines of the project team. One of the challenges with directly serving the hospital means Purple Line remains out on Beam Avenue. The platforms are on Beam Avenue. The Purple Line is not coming into the transit center, where today we would be replacing the Route 54 on White Bear Avenue coming from this corridor. 54 goes into the transit center, and your transfer could be as easy as walking across the same platform to get to the connecting service. That is not what we have at a 1% level of design. We think there are ways to do this, but we would need to get into the design process to figure that out. We have heard from those who use mobility devices in particular that it is important to them that usability of that connection remain the same or as close to the same as possible. It's not that they were opposed to a direct service to the hospital, but not at the cost of a less convenient connection for them at the transit center. So it relates to alternative northern endpoints. So at the end of RMS Phase 1, we concluded that these were not viable under proposed policy guidance. They still remain that way under current policy guidance. Under proposed policy guidance that we hope to have enacted by the end of this year, it does a lot for Purple Line. It changes how FTA views these projects. Both of these alignment endpoints are federally viable under the proposed guidance that hopefully will be in place by the end of this year. What we're now working through is just because we can, should we? There are other considerations, including Network Now you heard about today, offering up different services that don't exist today to both Vadnais Heights and the Century College area. In addition to ridership and cost, the endpoint going to Vadnais Heights requires a new bridge over 694. So there's other considerations beyond just federal funding viability. And as such, we've decided to take a little bit more time, even if that makes things a little more messy. We are breaking apart our revised LPA into two parts, an action in October on route and an action in December on endpoint. And this will allow us to explore and answer open questions as we share what we're seeing with our project partners, and then make sure that we're considering everything before we make a recommendation. We were before Vadnais Heights City Council a week ago. For example, Century College, if that were to be the endpoint, we probably wouldn't want to be operating full service plan during the summer when there's not a lot of activity going on there. So we've started the conversation with FTA whether that would be an acceptable thing, just as a couple of examples. Design options in Maplewood. We really have two side running options north of Larpenteur and then center running options, and we have two options. It's wider north of Larpenteur and Maplewood, so we can accommodate medians on the outside of the transit way, so fully dedicated, or a single median down the middle, which essentially would allow buses primarily and emergency service vehicles. St. Paul is narrower, so we actually have a single direction side running bus lane option, two side running lanes like in Maplewood, and then a center running option with a single median. Two more slides to go. This is our overall project schedule. I'm not going to go through all this, but want to call your attention to the purple circles going from left to right. Getting to a revised LPA by December is absolutely critical. You'll see that in that first circle on the far left. That allows us to then advance design and advance environmental review. Those are key pieces because then moving on to that second circle, we need to complete at least 30% design. We need to amend the TPP with the LPA. We need to have an environmentally cleared project before asking for permission from FTA to enter engineering phase. We show that in February of 2026. Typically takes up to 6 months for FTA to turn that around. We would assume we get entry into engineering in July of 26. That's in that middle circle, the third circle. And what that's important is we can't ask to get into the presidential budget until we're in the engineering phase. So you see a 1 month difference between those two milestones. And then you see that we get into the president's budget in February of 27. And that's important because in that last circle, we'd like to get our full funding grant agreement at the start of construction in December of 27. If we cannot make that submittal in August of 26, we lose an entire year because it's only once a year that the president forms his budget, his or her budget. So we would have to delay start of construction, or Ramsey County would have to be willing to take on the risk of getting a full year into construction before having any federal dollars flow to this project. Lastly, I wanted to end with what's coming before the council. We have a quartet of items coming on November 13th, which would come, I believe, at the October 28th to this committee. And that is amending our agreement with Ramsey County for the funding of the project. Right now that goes through the extended PD phase, which expires in December. It's to amend our engineering contract to allow for design to move forward after a decision is made in October and December. Right now, we're co-residing with the Gold Line. The Gold Line's lease expires in February. We'd like to stay there. And so we're going to extend that lease till 2030. And then we need to start looking ahead to next year and the staffing support from MnDOT. So we have that funding agreement coming forward as well. We'll be back before this body and the full council as we have a revised LPA next year. And after we get resolutions of support from our partner cities and county, we'll be starting that amendment process to the TPP 2050, starting in spring, hopefully concluding in fall. So with that, I will stand for questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments? Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Craig, amazing. I can't remember what year it was, but I know it was during COVID that I first met you. Charles had set up the meeting and we were at a little coffee shop over in Minneapolis, sitting outside, avoiding giving each other COVID. I think it was during COVID, wasn't it? Yeah. Anyway, you've been phenomenal in terms of your flexibility and your just ability to you and your team get through some really tough conversations and decisions, and you can't be commended enough for this. So thanks for sticking with this project. A lot of people would have walked away a long time ago. I also want to commend Ramsey County and the communities involved in this work. Had it not been for the Ramsey County Commissioners, this would be very, very different now, and perhaps easier, but I'm not so sure. I think there'd be a lot of tension, a lot of angst. So the county's wisdom in stepping back and rethinking this, and then the community's partnering in, and then the leadership of the staff has just been a tremendous combination. So thank you.
And I just want to echo that, especially to Ramsey County for taking an opportunity to look at two different options to make sure that they're getting the thing that fits best for their communities and having an open mind to figure out, what really is going to provide what the communities need. So very many thanks. All right, any other questions, comments? Thank you for the update then. We'll look forward to seeing more of you soon. So if there's nothing else, we can be adjourned.
You did.